to close the electricity gap in our country. This, in many ways, is a call for all South Africans to be part of the solution, to contribute in whatever way that we all can to end energy scarcity in South Africa. As government, we are announcing a number of interventions to overcome the immediate crisis. In the past 10 days, I have had extensive discussions with the Eskom executive management, with power station managers and former Eskom personnel. I've also met with labor federations, Business Unity South Africa, the Black Business Council, community representatives, and several experts in the energy sector. This morning, I also met with political party leaders. I'm grateful for the valuable proposals and inputs, as well as analyses that they have put forward. These meetings have helped to shape our response and ensure all sections of South African society are involved in finding solutions to this problem, as this is a national crisis. All the people I've spoken to have said this is the time when the country must unite to address this challenge. The set of additional actions I'm announcing this evening, firstly, are aimed at improving the performance of Eskom's existing fleet of power stations. Secondly, these actions will accelerate the procurement of new generation capacity. Thirdly, these actions are intended to increase the private sector investment in generation capacity. Fourthly, these actions are designed to enable businesses as well as households to invest in rooftop solar installation. And finally, these actions are directed at fundamentally transforming the electricity sector and positioning it for future sustainability. So, fellow South Africans, for our response to be effective, we need to understand the problem. In other words, what the problem is. South Africa has installed capacity to produce approximately 46,000 megawatts of electricity, and at peak times, when there's high demand, we use about 32,000 megawatts of electricity. However, only 60% of this installed capacity is available at any given time due to some units going through planned maintenance processes and others having unplanned outages. Many of our power stations were built many years ago. The average age of Eskom's power station is around 35 years. Generally, as power stations get older, their performance deteriorates. The construction of our newest power stations, Medupi and Kusile, started late, and they have experienced several delays and also some design flaws. These challenges are being addressed. As a result of this, Eskom deferred essential maintenance to keep the lights on. This is what is causing breakdowns and failures at the moment. The performance of some of Eskom's power stations have been further worsened by extensive theft and fraud, as well as sabotage. After years of state capture and mismanagement, there is now a capable and effective management team which is working hard to turn the utility around and reverse years of decay. However, as things implement a program that encourages efficient use by consumers to reduce demand at peak times. We have spoken in the past about Eskom's huge debt, which stands at close on to 400 billion rand. The debt continues to be a huge burden on Eskom's ability to address its many challenges. The National Treasury is working to finalize a sustainable solution to Eskom's debt. The Minister of Finance will outline how government will deal with this matter in an effective manner when he presents the medium-term budget policy statement in October. We will use climate funding provided through the Just Energy Transition Partnership that we struck last year to invest in the grid and repurpose power plants that have reached the end of their lives. Eskom will be constructing its first solar and battery storage projects at Komati, Majuba, and Letabo, and several other power stations. This will result in over 500 megawatts being added to the grid. The South African Police Service has set up a special law enforcement team to help Eskom in confronting crime and corruption and fraud that has tended to be quite rife in Eskom power stations. A number of people have already been arrested in recent days, and several others are already being prosecuted for corruption and fraud involving Eskom contracts. With improvements in the regulatory environment and mobilization of society, Eskom will be positioned to carry out its maintenance and investment programs. There can be no longer any excuses that anyone can now offer. These steps will allow us to limit load shedding to lower stages and to reduce the risk of such severe load shedding in the future. To end load shedding, however, we need to urgently add much more capacity to the grid. In other words, we need more megawatts to be put on the grid. And past managers of Eskom tell us that we need the base load of Eskom's capacity to generate electricity to be stabilized by having those units that may not be operating at the present moment to be revived so that that base load can be put on the grid. Our second priority is therefore to accelerate the procurement of new capacity from renewables, capacity from gas, and battery storage. The relevant government departments are working together to ensure that all projects from bid window 5 of the Renewable Energy Program can start construction on schedule. This includes taking a pragmatic approach to the local content requirements for these projects, prioritizing the need to build new capacity as quickly as possible. The Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, together with the Independent Power Producers Office, will provide further details in this regard within the coming days on how we are going to process and deal with the challenges that we face in this regard. The amount of new generation capacity procured through bid window 6 for wind and solar power will be doubled from 2,600 megawatts to 5,200 megawatts. We will release a request for proposals for battery storage by September this year, and a further request for gas power as soon as possible thereafter. The Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy will issue a determination for the remaining allocations in the Integrated Resource Plan 2019 and will open further bid windows on an expedited basis. To ensure effective planning, the country's integrated resource plan is being reviewed to reflect the need for additional generation capacity, as well as to address our climate change commitments. Thirdly, we are accelerating greater private sector investment in generation capacity. Last year, we announced the raising of the licensing threshold to 100 megawatts. This move was widely welcomed. It has unlocked a pipeline of more than 80 confirmed private sector projects with a combined capacity of over 6,000 megawatts. We are already working together with industry to accelerate the most advanced projects, several of which are already entering construction. These changes have fundamentally changed the generation landscape. Following the success of this reform and the enthusiasm shown by the private sector, we will remove the licensing threshold for embedded generation completely. This will enable private investment in electricity generation to rise to higher levels. While they may not require licenses, all new generation projects will still have to register with the regulator and comply with the technical requirements for grid connection and our environmental legislation. One of our greatest challenges is adding capacity to the grid, is the time that it takes for any energy project to receive the necessary approvals and commence construction. The process from design to commercial operation has tended to take more than 3 years, almost 1,000 days, due to lengthy regulatory processes and red tape. While existing legislation may be sufficient in ordinary times, the current crisis requires that we act decisively and more speedily. We will therefore be tabling special legislation in Parliament on an expedited basis to address the legal and regulatory obstacles to new generation capacity for a limited period. We raised this matter this morning with leaders of political parties represented in the National Assembly. There was broad agreement that this process should be hastened once the special legislation has been approved by Cabinet and tabled in Parliament. We will, in the meantime, waive or streamline certain regulatory requirements where it is possible to do so within existing legislation. This includes reducing the regulatory requirements for solar projects in areas of low and medium environmental sensitivity. It also means Eskom can expand power lines and substations without needing to get environmental authorization in areas of low and medium sensitivity and within the strategic electricity corridors. We're also establishing a single point of entry, in other words, a one-stop shop, as it were, for the energy project applications to ensure that there is coordination of approval processes across government, so that those who apply should not be moving from one department to the next, and thus facing months and months of delays. I have instructed departments and entities to review all existing timeframes and to ensure that we process all applications on an urgent basis so that we do not have these elongated delays. These measures are preferable to declaring a state of disaster or even emergency, as some have suggested. These interventions will allow us to do what is necessary to accelerate new generation capacity while protecting the rights of all South Africans and upholding the rule of law. We do not need a state of emergency or declare a national state of disaster to implement common sense regulations that should help in resolving our energy crisis. We have all the instruments and processes that we can implement. Fourthly, we intend to enable businesses as well as households to invest in rooftop solar installation. South Africa has great abundance of sun, which we should really use to generate electricity. There is significant potential for households and businesses to install rooftop solar and connect this power to the grid. To incentivize greater uptake of rooftop solar, Eskom will develop rules and a pricing structure known as a feed-in tariff for all commercial and residential installations on its network. This means that those who can and have already installed solar panels in their homes or businesses will be able to sell surplus power that they do not need to Eskom. And we call on all South Africans to use electricity sparingly as we work towards ending load shedding and getting more energy on the grid. Finally, we are fundamentally transforming the electricity sector. And positioning it for future sustainability. We've spoken in the past about restructuring Eskom, which will result in the establishment of 3 entities, namely an electricity generation entity, an electricity transmission entity, and an electricity distribution entity. Eskom has established an independent transmission company and is on track to separate generation distribution businesses by the end of this year. We will soon be appointing boards for the transmission and generation entities. Broader reforms to establish a competitive electricity market will also be expedited through the finalization of the Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill to enable private sector investment. These changes will radically transform the structure of the electricity sector for future generations. Many other countries have taken this route and have been able to stabilize their electricity generation. They will diversify our energy sources and improve the security of supply. Now, these changes will allow more generators, both private and state-owned, to compete on an equal footing. The grid will remain owned by the state, in other words, state-owned. Eskom will continue to be the mainstay of our country's energy industry as we improve its efficiency, its financial sustainability, and its performance. We've always said that Eskom is too big to fail, and it is a national asset, and we therefore need to secure it and make it more efficient. But it will coexist with the private investment and generation that is already underway. To ensure that these measures are implemented in a coordinated manner, I have established a National Energy Crisis Committee. The committee is chaired by the Director General in the Presidency and brings together all the departments and entities involved in the provision of electricity. They bring together the Department of Public Enterprises, Department of Fisheries, Forestry and Energy, the Department of Mineral and Energy, the Treasury is also part of it, the police are also part of it. And so all the departments that have to do with helping us to stabilize our energy system will be part of it, and it will be coordinated from the presidency. The National Energy Crisis Committee will draw on the best available expertise from business, from labor, from professional engineering entities, and community-based organizations. We'll be able to work together with all these entities as we did when we confronted the issue of the pandemic, but more particularly the vaccination process, where we had business, labor, community-based organizations working together with government to address the biggest rollout of vaccinations our country had ever been through. So we will harness all this energy and all these various entities as we work to ensure that we stabilize our energy generation. The relevant ministers will report to me directly from their various ministries on a regular basis to ensure that we move quickly to implement the actions that we have announced today. So, fellow South Africans, the measures I have outlined are not just to address our immediate constraints. They are also to ensure that we do stabilize our energy generation in our country through a variety of all these measures. Our ultimate objective is to achieve long-term energy security so that we never have to experience electricity shortage again. We aim to do this by stabilizing Eskom and improving plant performance, establishing a competitive electricity market, opening the way for private investment in new generation capacity, and increasing our investment in renewables. As we do this, we will also heed the message from community-based organizations who said our focus must also be on the poor and the vulnerable. Now, these measures are necessary to ensure that we revive economic growth so that we are able to create jobs in our country. In the process, we will position our country as a leading player in the transition to new and sustainable energy sources, turning this crisis into an opportunity for future growth and resilience. Just as government will play its part, I call